I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation on DTC advertising in the digital space. A couple of ground rules as we get started with the presentation. During the presentation, I'd like you to type in your questions in the chat bar you'll see on your right. At the end of the presentation, we'll be answering questions as they come up. So today's presentation is going to be about groundbreaking tips on DTC advertising in the digital space. It's about a revolution in pharma marketing. This was originally presented in Boston in April of this year in conjunction with DTC Perspectives, which is an organization that presents the best practices and ideas in the marketing space. It's a national organization. This is an annual conference. It's held every year in the spring. And at this conference, we had about 500 attendees. So there was a large group of clients. It was a great experience for us in conjunction with DTC Perspectives and Scott Ehrlich, who runs DTC Perspectives. The presentation was very well received by the audience. And so following the presentation, we decided that it would be a good idea to present this webinar for clients who couldn't be there. So we're really happy to have you join us today and to be able to share with you some of these ideas that can help as you're looking to the digital space to add to your opportunity to market with the patient population. So when we think about DTC advertising, first we have to take ourselves back to the early days of DTC advertising. And this goes back to the beginning of the year 2000. So this was a time when pharmaceutical clients were discovering the opportunity to present their brands to patients using large-scale marketing programs, often supported by large-scale television campaigns. Some of these campaigns included the campaign for Cialis with the tubs, introducing the idea that erectile dysfunction could be treated. Lamisil did an excellent job of presenting their product using Digger the dermatophyte to show how patients could be affected by this condition and how it could get in underneath their toenails and really cause them a problem, turning their toenails yellow. Restasis was out there, Nexium presented the purple pill, and Ambien was able to achieve a very strong status in the marketplace with very good advertising. More recently, we've seen advertising from Symbicort, including the Woof, that presents to patients how they can treat their COPD. So these early days were large-scale programs, often costing over $100 million, and achieving the kinds of ROIs that pharmaceutical clients wanted to see as they were trying to reach out to patients. ROIs at that period could achieve 3, 4, 5 to 1. More recently, what we're seeing is that with smaller groups of patients watching the advertising for drugs that are not as large in terms of the population, the ROIs have dropped, and the average ROI on DTC advertising on television is about 1.2 to 1. So it's a much smaller ROI. So now we start to think about what is the new environment and what are new ways to advertise to patients in order to generate interest around brands. So the DTC advertising next generation is involving the potential for using the digital space to advertise. And what clients are often asking is that a space where patients really are? Many clients think the digital space is a space that has primarily the younger generations watching and seeing information, and not as many of the patients in the older generations. But in this presentation, we'll show that this is an opportunity that will reach the patients you're trying to talk to. So I'm going to give you a personal story about something that I experienced as an example as we get into this. Last year, I found out from my doctor, unfortunately, that I was experiencing stage 4 cancer in my throat. The doctor told me about this, and it was a real shock to me. And of course, I wanted to know more. So who could I turn to? Not friends. What I did, as many patients will do, is I went online and I learned that my condition could be very successfully treated, and that in fact the survivability rate was over 80% for patients like myself. So using a course of treatment that I discussed with my doctors, I was able to achieve a very positive result. And about 2 months ago, I'm very happy to say, I got my PET scan. My PET scan showed that my cancer was cured. So I'm a cancer survivor and very happily so. So in this case, using information that was available to me online, I was able to learn more about how to treat my condition and what to do. So this presentation we're going to be doing today is drawn from the MetrixLab database. And MetrixLab does a very large number of creative tests for clients around the globe. We have a database that includes over 3,000 new advertisements tested every year across digital, social, mobile, and television. So we have a large database to draw on, and we've used this database to look at what are the successful characteristics of DTC advertising and advertising in other categories in the digital space. And we're going to be talking about that today. So let's talk about the opportunity. The question that comes up again from clients is, who's online? And as you look at the percentages here as a quiz, I think a lot of you will immediately go to the largest percentage. And you're right. There's a very large percentage of the US population online using the digital space. But the second question that's asked, of course, is this the population that we want to reach? And many of our clients will say, well, it's all very good and well that the younger populations are online, but what about older patients who may not be using the internet? Well, what we can say is the older population is there too. Over 82% of people over the age of 65 years old are online. So you are able to reach and talk to the population that you want to speak to. But let's think about what is that going to mean for you in your marketing campaigns. In terms of the path to treatment, these patients are learning about information online, just like myself. So we find that 72% of patients who are experiencing any condition will go online to learn about their condition. They're investigating what's the causes of their condition, how do patients treat their condition, and what are the steps that they should take. Now, even more importantly, nearly a quarter of patients go online before a key meeting with a doctor to find out what they should do next. And this is in consideration of even things like new treatments for their condition. So as you're advertising, one of the most important things that you should be thinking about is the recency effect. Do patients see the information before they talk to a doctor? And therefore, is it something that will be top of mind as they're having that discussion? And what this is showing us is that even just as a patient is about to talk to their doctor, they are going online, they are learning more about their condition and ways to treat it. And even more powerfully, what we're seeing is among those patients that are going online, learning about their condition, learning about treatments, 2 in 5 will talk to their doctor about a specific drug. So if you're presenting information to patients that's about your drug and the benefits of your drug and treatment, this is something that they can come into the doctor's office and say, I've learned about something that I'd like to ask you about. This is going to trigger that conversation with the doctor and inform that conversation in a way that can lead to the selection of your brand of medication. So one more thing to talk about is that recency and the amount of exposure that patients have to information online. They're online a lot. Just as with TV, the online environment is being consumed a lot of the time during the day for a patient. So they're spending about 5 hours a day online. But unlike television, the online space is a space where they value the information. When they see information there, they're more likely to say that is information that's credible, that's information that's relevant, and it's information that I should pay attention to. 87% as compared with 41% of patients seeing information about treatments or medications on TV that would say that that information is credible. So the online space is a place where they go, and it's a place where they can learn information that they will find informative to that discussion that they'll have with a doctor. So let's talk a little bit about how we execute on this opportunity and how do we make the most of the online space. These are characteristics that we know from the television advertising that's been done over the past 15 years. So looking at our database, we see certain characteristics of TV advertising that has been most effective in driving patient action. And we can learn from this, but what we're going to have to pay attention to is the idea that what works in TV will not necessarily work in the digital space. And we'll talk about that later. So among the advertising that is being done in the TV space, what we notice is first you have to spotlight the brand. But as with Cialis, you often have the luxury to bring the brand in during a slow reveal. And you can talk about the environment, you can talk about how the patient is feeling, you can show interactions, and slowly get into the presentation of the branded idea of Cialis in context of erectile dysfunction. We've seen a lot of advertising in TV that has issues with creative overload. So there's a lot of abstractions used, visualizations that are hard to follow. This is a problem with some of the television advertising. The Lamisil example that was early days for DTC advertising in TV was very powerful. So Lamisil used Digger the dermatophyte to show getting underneath the toenail and causing a problem there, turning patients' toenails yellow. This was something that really drew patients in, and they said, I can relate to that condition. I see that my toenail is turning yellow. I got to do something. And Lamisil experienced a very sharp increase of scripts. Brand cues are really important in the television environment. So what happens is patients may have difficulty remembering the brand name, but as they see cues that relate to the brand, they therefore can go in and talk to their doctor. So this is a recent example of Symbicort advertising showing a wolf that's having trouble breathing because the wolf is experiencing COPD, goes in and talks to the doctor. Patients can remember the wolf, and if patients go in and talk to their doctor about a drug that's related to a wolf, the doctor can say, hey, I know what you're talking about. I know you're talking about Symbicort, and I'm going to give you a treatment for that. Another thing that's been very powerful in TV advertising is testimonials. Lipitor saw one of its most powerful advertisements around a patient, Dean, who was speaking about his issues with cardiovascular disease. And he was speaking about survivability and using Lipitor in order to achieve the best results. This was one of the strongest Lipitor advertisements used. Demos, MOA information has also been very powerful in the TV space. So demos and MOAs present information that's something that it is interesting to patients. It shows how a condition is affecting them, and therefore they can talk to their doctor and say, I'm understanding more about how this condition affects me personally. Can you tell me more about treatment? So it's driving information home, information very important to patients because they want to learn more about how to treat their conditions. We've seen TV advertising with quick cuts. Rosarum had issues putting a lot of very odd ideas in front of the patients they could not understand. By projecting leadership, DTC advertising on TV was effective as well. Patients like to see that this is a drug that leads the category or is superior in some way to other alternatives. Restasis, with their advertising, has done a really good job of integrating a doctor into their television ads. And by integrating the doctor, they're showing credibility, but they're also doing something that many pharmaceutical clients don't think about, and that is they're getting a relationship between the patient and the doctor into the picture. This can influence not only patients, but it also influences the doctors who are also watching TV. And Restasis has seen excellent results based on their advertising efforts. And finally, many of the drugs have been using spokespeople as the people who speak about the condition and how they treat it personally. This is working best when we choose spokespeople who are credible and relevant to patients. A problem with picking a celebrity is that often a patient will say, is that person saying this just because they're being paid? Or do they really feel positive about this medication that they're using to treat? And Sally Fields was able to do this very well for Beniva, driving home the idea that she experienced the condition and Beniva was helping her to treat the condition. So these were characteristics that we saw over the past 15 years, and I think everybody learned from this. Agencies developed ways of addressing the marketing in the television space, and they got really good at it. But now we got to fast forward to what is the current environment. So the current environment has media conditions that are really changing. We're living in a world now where we're seeing advertising all the time. We're being bombarded by different ideas and advertisements. And as you're going online, you're watching things flicking across the screen. So you see information about brands, you see information about people, you see news stories, you see videos, all this happening in a very rapid fashion. And so we have to find a way to evaluate how this information is going through, and is it really even being seen? MetrixLab has a testing approach which involves testing in context of the environment that the patient will find themselves in. And what we're doing here is we're saying, do you see the ads? Do you remember the ads? Do you remember the brands? And by doing this, we're trying to determine, will this ad really be seen by the patient, and will they take action as a result? So this is quite important in our testing approach, and it will play into the results that we're about to review. So let's talk about the first wave of digital DTC advertising. It's really a pioneer situation. So in the industry, pharmaceutical is really the laggard. Most of the other categories, consumer goods, financial, cars, all other categories, getting involved in digital advertising much faster than the pharmaceutical industry. And in fact, digital has now become one of the primary drivers of marketing efforts in other categories, but it's just beginning for the pharmaceutical industry. So I want to talk about a condition called Dupuytren's contracture. And as you see in this picture, what happens with this condition is patients begin to notice their fingers are doing strange things. So it's not a painful condition, but it's a condition where the fingers start moving in odd ways, and the patient's going to say, I don't understand what's happening to me. They're going to go into a doctor. They're going to want to learn more. And the doctor's going to say to them, you can treat this with physical therapy. You can treat this with surgery. These are some of the options that are available to you. Often, the doctor will not talk about non-surgical options. So one of our clients looked at this and said, we can do something different. And they have a treatment which does not involve surgery. So Endo with Xiaflex has an option for patients that's non-surgical. And by simply placing an ad, a banner ad, in the digital space, drawing the attention of the patient that they can treat their condition with a non-surgical option, patients were quickly drawn in. They clicked on the Learn More button on the banner, and they were taken into the website where they could read more about how this condition could be treated. By reading about the treatment of this condition, they learned that Xiaflex was an option, and the client experienced excellent results from this very simple banner ad. So an example of getting into that space online, offering patients information that was very relevant to them in a very simple manner, having a very strong effect among the patient population. A great example of some of the early days of digital advertising. Another advantage for clients on the online space is there's not a lot of competition there. So you're playing with an open playing field. You have the opportunity to speak in a way that your competition may not be doing because they're not there. So if a competitor is using television advertising but is not really revealing their brand in the online space, it often happens that the competitor is driving interest to the online space. Patients then learn about your brand because you're there for the patient to learn more. And the patient wants to learn more in order to know what to do and how to talk about their condition with a doctor. So what we have to say is, thinking about first the TV rules are different than the rules that we see for the digital space. And that's the important thing we have to think about today is as you're starting to go into the online space, you need to think about different characteristics of DTC advertising in the digital space and present your marketing ideas in a way that's different in that space to have the maximum effect. Here we're showing Don Draper. Don Draper, the classic guy from the 60s who develops television advertising. But like so many agencies, he's going to look at this and say, I don't really get this. I don't really understand what this means and how to execute a proper digital campaign for pharmaceutical. So as we reviewed our database, we saw several characteristics of DTC digital advertising that was misfiring. One of the most important ones probably, among the digital advertisements for DTC, most were failing to introduce the brand quickly. And this is a big miss because in this space, it has to be fast. Among these ads that we looked at, almost none were showing a doctor, MOA, or demo. So there's no relationship between the patient and the doctor. They're not getting that kind of news that we've seen so effective in the television space about how the medication works or a demo of what's happening within their body. These are areas where pharmaceutical clients could potentially improve upon their ads and have a stronger effect. We also noticed that among the digital ads online currently, almost none of them were using testimonials. And what we're going to show you later is the testimonial, the very few testimonial ads that we do have were the ones that were showing excellent results. And finally, only about a quarter of the ads in the digital space were visualizing the problem that the patient was experiencing. And that's another really big miss because by showing the problem, by getting a situation where a patient can say, I see that, I experience that, I feel that myself, that's what's really triggering an action for patients. So these were big misses in the digital advertising that currently exists and help to explain potentially why digital advertising for pharmaceutical clients is not as effective as it is in other categories. Let's look at some of the data behind this information. So the ideas we're talking about here, first, we know from our evaluation of DTC digital advertising that the brand or the problem has to be identified in the online video within the first 4 seconds. Patients will move on. If you're not showing something that they can relate to very quickly, they're going to move on and the video is going to have very little effect. Second, brand messages need to be simple, driving action to the brand site, which will pay off the information even further. So the banner ad that we just saw for Dupuytren's condition was a good example of a very simple idea presented to the patients in a way that they could understand. Third, we noticed that the most successful digital advertising for pharma is highlighting the situation in an emotional way. It's engaging a system 1 response, so a patient feels it viscerally. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get the interest that you want from the patients and the action taken as a result. Unfortunately, the vast majority of digital DTC ads are not showing the problem or the patient in an emotional situation, and they're disengaging. Fourth, as with the Lamisil example, we need to see the problem itself visualized. So what is the patient experiencing? Why is it a problem for them? And why should they think about your drug or your brand for treatment? Fifth, you need to visualize the patients. All too many of the DTC digital ads are simply putting text into the ad and expecting from the text, which is often quite complicated, that the patient will get it and be pulled into the ad. That's simply not the case. And finally, we see that video that's in the digital space should not require sound in order for it to be understood, because the vast majority of patients are seeing this video as they're online silently. So unless you have a way for patients to understand what you're talking about without the audio, you're going to miss the opportunity to catch their attention and to draw them into the advertising. So data behind this. This is from our database showing that the shortest ads are holding the attention of the consumers that are watching the ad. So the yellow line on the bottom is indicating the number of seconds viewed by the ad that's being shown. And we can see that up to about 7 seconds, the consumers are watching most of the ad or all of the ad. But after 7 seconds, it's starting to diverge. So you're losing the attention of the patients as they're watching the video for a longer period. So getting that information about the brand and the condition in very quickly, and we would say even within 4 seconds, is critical to the success of the advertising. You got to get it in fast. So unlike what's being done in television, where we see slow reveals, we're showing interactions between patients, we're showing situations, but in TV, we're not talking about the brand or the condition until later into the ad. That's not going to work. Now, I understand these videos necessarily have to be longer, often to present fair balance information, but we need to get that brand idea and the condition idea out quickly to the patients to have the maximum effect. Understanding. So in television, when we do testing, we often find that consumers will say they more or less get the television ad, they understand it. But the understanding levels for DTC digital advertising are particularly low. So when we look at our database by tertiles, what we see is the ads, and there's a vast majority of the ads which patients have trouble following, have low levels of interest that's generated based on the ad. So 3 out of 5 of the ads we're testing are in the low 20s in terms of actions generated. What we see is those ads that are most understandable to patients have very strong levels of action, call to action, and discussion with doctors as a result. So you need to make your ideas in your digital advertising clear. They need to be highly understandable, and they need to be to the point so that the patient takes away a simple message, a simple idea that is something that they can discuss with their doctor. It's what causes that long-term branded memorability that we're really looking for. Emotional hooks. So I think what pharmaceutical companies have done is they've learned from their HCP advertising that doctors need to have a lot of very clinical information about a brand in order to draw their attention. But that's not what works for patients. So the vast majority of DTC digital ads are highly rational, and that's just not working with patients. So what we see is on the left-hand side, the light blue, this is the vast majority of digital ads for DTC, and they're highly rational. By comparison to the red line or the red bar, which is indicating emotionally based, or to the right of that, emotional and rational based ads, the ones that are highly emotional are the ones that really grab the attention of the patients and drive the action that you want to see. So the emotionally based ads, they're grabbing attention, they're delivering the brand, they present a message idea in a way that patients can understand, they're likable, they're relevant, and we can see on the far right, most importantly, they're driving that discussion with the doctor much better, significantly better than ads that are speaking in a rational fashion. So the example that I've shown here is an Enbrel ad. And what it's showing is a child simply sketching out some impressions of what's happening with his mother. He's wondering, is my mom's joint pain being caused by something that could be worse, like joint damage? The patient, the mother herself, seeing this ad and saying, yes, this is something that I should pay attention to. This is something I need to talk to my doctor about. And this is for Enbrel. And what this causes is the mother to say, I really need to do something. I need to have that discussion with my doctor. Next, to visualize the problem. So it's not the same kind of situation in the digital space as we have in TV. You've got pictures, you've got animated banners, but you can do as what Lyrica has done to visualize the problem that a patient experiences as they're experiencing fibromyalgia. So the patient experiences a pain that they can feel. It's a really visceral pain, and it's causing them to have a lot of problems in their life. As the patient sees this, they say, that's relevant to me. I understand that. I feel that. And those ads that are visualizing the problem in this kind of manner are more likable, highly understandable, and driving the interest to talk to the doctor in the way that the pharma clients are looking for. Human presence. So over the years, I think there's been an impression that slice of life type advertising on TV becomes a little bit mundane. But the problem in the digital space is that nobody is even really trying to show slice of life. So the minority of ads in the online space showing people who are interacting or people who are experiencing the problem. But by showing a person, the person's face is what really gets them to pay attention. So these two ads from Pfizer, both highly effective according to the information in our database. Lyrica showing a woman who's enjoying the time with her family. Chantix showing Ryan, who's reflecting a character who is also shown on TV. And he's giving a testimonial on how Chantix is helping him to quit smoking. These are some of the strongest ads we see in our database. They're getting interest in the brand. They're credible. They're easy to understand. They're likable, driving emotional appeal, which drives home the interest in talking to a doctor. So these are some of the most powerful ads that we see in the digital space. And it's an easy opportunity for our clients to execute something that will have a much stronger effect among the patients. And finally, what we know is that to thrive in the social mobile environment, videos should be seen and understood and make sense even when they're being played without sound. So I'm going to end this presentation and information about what works online by telling you a little story about something that happened in my family. What happened is the other day, about 2 weeks ago, my wife decided out of the blue to make us a cheesecake. She hasn't done that before in years. And I noticed that currently online, Philadelphia cream cheese is playing a video, which is easy to understand. You don't have to have the video on. And it's just showing first the packaging for Philadelphia cream cheese. It's showing a strawberry cheesecake. It's very delicious looking when you see the video, how it can be stored, and then how it can be served to the family. So this, I'm not sure if my wife saw it. I don't know, but what I do know is we all enjoyed a really nice cheesecake from my wife. And this is the kind of thing that's going to catch the consumer's eye. They're going to see it, even if they don't remember seeing it, it can trigger an action. In a similar fashion, what we know is that patients may see information about their condition. It can trigger an idea for a conversation with a doctor. But remember, the vast majority, 85% of consumers that are online will be seeing videos with the sound turned off. So you can't expect that the sound for the video is what's going to enable them to understand your brand or how the brand can be used to treat the condition. So let's sum it up. The creative tips that we have, which will help us to understand how to present our branded ideas and our messages online, is that we have to remember we need to brand early and use brand cues with our advertisement that will trigger a long-term memorability for the brand online. We need to make the brand the star so we don't have the luxury of the slow reveal for scenes in the videos. We have to get the brand front and center for the patient. We need to demonstrate the problem so the patient can relate to the problem and they can understand this is something that is relevant to me. I'm experiencing this, and it's something I need to do something about. I need to talk to my doctor. We need to keep it simple, use only a few claims. We need to look for strong openings, as with the cheesecake example that I've just shown you. Show an idea that will draw them right in from the start. Then they may watch your video longer. We need to think billboards because the detail can be shown later, but they need to see the main idea front and center. Think about a silent movie. Use only the time that you need, and know that attention is fleeting as these patients are online. You need to grab their attention. You need to deliver the information in a way that's short, sweet, and succinct. And finally, if you're thinking about smartphones, remember these are smaller screens, so you need to keep it even shorter and simpler. Allow for the patient to zoom in on images or information if they need to in order to understand what you're trying to present. And finally, and this is a big miss that we're seeing all the time, pharma companies that are trying to translate their videos from TV into the online space need to understand that these types of transitions aren't always going to work. So we need to do it in such a way that is consistent with the online space, and often that's going to involve simplification of the ideas that are used in videos in the digital environment. So with that, I'm going to take a pause and answer some of the questions that have been coming in. Let's see what we have here. All right. A question from Simon. Okay, so how does regulatory affect what we're doing in the online space? So the FDA has provided us with guidelines and ideas about how to use digital marketing in the online space. It's similar to what we see in the TV space, but with some variations on that. We've seen some excellent examples of pharmaceutical advertising that's working within the regulatory confines, but also presenting information that's effective. And we're more than happy to share that with you. This is probably a good conversation for us to have offline. So more than happy to have a one-on-one discussion with you about how regulatory and the digital space are interacting. Okay. From Anna, differences between TV and digital advertising. So there's a very clear difference in what we see between what can be accomplished with television advertising and what can be accomplished in the digital space. A television ad, as we know, is a very fleeting ad. Because of the large budgets needed to support TV advertising, you can only do it infrequently. So patients could be exposed to your advertising 3, 4, 5, 6 times, but not as frequently and maybe not as consistent coming up to their meeting with a doctor. So things that we know is, first, you can't present as many clear ideas in the television space as you can do with digital. You can deliver a lot more of the information in the digital space, so you're able to drive home points about how your treatment works in a way that goes further than TV. Also, you have the advantage in the digital space of recency. So as a patient's getting involved and learning more about their condition, they're going to start necessarily seeing more ads in the digital space around their condition. And this could be more related to their upcoming meeting with a doctor. So they may see information about their treatment just before going to a doctor's office. And that's going to be critical as it arms them with the information that they need for the discussion with a doctor. Okay. From Jeff, can you comment on the returns on investment from digital advertising compared to television? So as I said up front, what we're seeing currently is that at best, television advertising, and this is a lot to do with the expense of television advertising, is delivering about a 1.2 to 1 return on investment on average. So it's not huge, it's respectable, but it's not a huge return on investment. I think many pharma clients are feeling that they need to be in that space in order to drive the awareness of their medications, and they're right. By no means are we saying that digital should replace television advertising, because digital doesn't do the same thing you can see with a television advertisement. However, the returns that we see from digital advertising are much higher. So the cost of being in the digital space and the ability to target patients in the digital space means your returns on investment can be much higher, 3, 4, even 5 to 1 compared to the cost of putting the information into the online space. Okay, so a question from Lisa. what's holding clients back. We have talked with our clients about some of the conditions that cause them to not be in the online space as often as perhaps we think they should be, because the pharma industry is probably among all categories one of the least spenders or lowest spenders in the digital space. And what's holding them back, some of it has to do probably with the concerns about regulatory environment, and those are real concerns. We see also that clients are concerned about how to actually implement the digital program. So there's not a lot of experience. MetrixLab, in cooperation with DTC Perspectives, is often offering workshops around this because clients are trying to learn more. We'll be happy to speak with anyone about how these workshops work. But I think that at the end of the day, I think there's a greater comfort level with how television and print and other channels are working. The comfort level in the digital space is not yet there, but it's something that I think pharma clients will move toward. And as they understand how great this opportunity is, they will get there in a stronger way. And we're there to help clients as they try to do this. Okay, a couple of final notes about the presentation. This was presented, as I said, in April with videos included in the presentation. We were unable to present videos in this presentation because of the limitations of the technology, but we'll be more than happy to circulate video and examples of how this type of advertising works online. So you just simply need to reach out to us. As I mentioned, Scott Ehrlich and myself have worked in cooperation in the development of this presentation. You can contact either one of us with any further questions. We'd like to thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this information very useful, and we hope to have an opportunity to work with you in the future as you take advantage of this amazing opportunity. Thank you very much.